Welcome to a tick-tocking time bomb position paper by Black Picket Fence, the educational arm of Security Today podcast. We are going to be going through a webinar today that is going to tackle the position paper, and we're going to get into it. We got about 5 minutes, right? So we're going to pick up some stragglers who want to come in and get going here, and then we're going to just dive into it. We got a lot to cover. I'm feeling good today. It's been a good day so far. The sun is shining, and yeah, it's been good. So I hope you all are doing well. We're going to wait for a couple minutes, and then we will get into it. Thank you, Josh, for telling me that you see me. That's how you know you've got a media expert on your hands, because he's been behind the camera wanting to know. Listen, let me give a little bit of background before we get into it. We've got a couple minutes, but by the time I get through the background, it will be 3 o'clock, and we will be killing it. So at the beginning of this year, I had nieces and nephews that were glued to their phones, and it was TikTok. I've known about TikTok the whole time. I had a TikTok when it first started, and, posted 1 or 2 videos of me walking my dog or something like that. But then, obviously, my name's Bear Halverson. I'm in the physical security field, and I'm a physical security expert. I work in engineering, so I engineer physical security sites. So security's always been something that has been on my mind. And there was a couple of security things that came through the industry that had to do with China. And then when I started to find out about how TikTok was associated with China, it just came on my radar, and I just watched it. Obviously, I saw the ban at the head of this year kind of pass and go through. And now they are working their way through court with appeals. Actually, it's pretty timely because just today, an appeals court denied their claim, and they're probably going to push it up to the Supreme Court. So it's a perfect time to talk about TikTok and everything that's associated with it. But I get back to my nieces and nephews who were glued to their phones. I have small children. And being in the security industry, just with China on the radar from a geopolitical security sphere, it was just something that I started to watch on. And then I started to read a book called Glow Kids, and it started to talk about the effects of screens, the effects of social media on adolescents. That led me to a book called The Anxious Generation. Let's see. Yeah. Right here. Hold on. That led me to this book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, and now I've been following his stuff and his content on Instagram, social media, right? But that is something that also changed my mind. And so just with all of that, I started researching TikTok like in my off time when I was sitting on the couch, not watching the Netflix show that's on, because we're all, victims to this digital age and consumerism mixed together. But all of that to say, it led me to a lot of information that I knew would be unjust if, with the platform that I had and the abilities that I had, I didn't curate it in some way, shape, or form to bring it to you guys. So we're just going to get into it today and talk about this position paper. There's a link in the show notes down below. that you can download the PDF. It's a little more flamboyant than maybe I'm going to be today. I needed it to go a little farther, stir a little more pots, right? But it is something that you can download and you can re-reference. You can go back. All of my citations, I'll show them at the end, but they are in the back of the PDF. I have made sure that I'm at least to well studied on this topic before I would bring it before some of my most respected peers. So let's just get into it, shall we? Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Stream Deck away. We're going to get into some of the slides. So like I said, this is the position paper, the TikToking Time Bomb. It is Black Picket Fence's first position paper. If you don't know, Black Picket Fence is the educational arm to the Security Today podcast. And Security Today podcast, I'm the host of. It is a security-related podcast in the physical security space, and it's led me to a lot of things. But I thought that this would be a relevant topic, even though it might seem a little bit off. Now, listen, my heart, my palms, they're open, right? If any of this information is something that you want to research into and I'm not presenting it as it should be presented, or if I'm presenting something from a way that you don't agree with, I would love to talk to you about it. I would love for you to tell me that information so that I can continue to grow myself, okay, and really get into it. So that's this. This is the table of contents. All right, we're going to go through 3 sections today. I'm going to try to pick up the pace a little bit because after typing out all the notes, I am a little worried that I can get it under an hour, at least with time for a Q&A or, anything like that. So if you have questions, type them into the chat. At the end of this webinar, I'll go back and I'll start answering the questions, and we'll see how many we can get through if we get to that. But I want to get through this, and we're going to do it in 3 sections. The first is I call the loss of privacy. The second is the danger of China. And the third is the scourge of our youth. Now, it's these 3 things that have brought me to draw your attention to the app TikTok. I understand that some of the stuff I'm going to present in the scourge of our youth is going to have to do with social media overall with adolescents. I understand that the danger of China doesn't lie in just the TikTok app. It's far more complex to that. And the loss of privacy in our terms and culture condition culture is something that is far widespread and beyond just social media apps. We're getting it everywhere from physical mail to anything that we sign up for or anything we purchase on the internet. So these things are wide scoping, but the fact that they kind of overlap in a Venn diagram, and this is the little part that is the triangle that's highlighted and TikTok resides in that, that's why I want to talk about TikTok. And it's relevant because Congress and the government and the Supreme Court are all talking about it right now to see if it's a threat to our national security. So that's what we're going to go through. And you can see the little bullet points there. And then in the conclusion, I say how to delete TikTok. I'll mention it, but it is in the PDF, word for word, step by step. And then I'm going to give you a couple of resources today that are going to give you some other options to help with your data, to help with your social media in adolescence, if you have children or anybody surrounding your life who has kids. So we shall get into that. Let's start with the introduction. So if you know, in April 24th, 2024, President Biden signed a law that would ban Chinese-owned TikTok unless it's sold within a year. Now listen, the legislative branch, they like to bake in a ton of different things, including foreign aid and, silver lining laws. But regardless, this was the specific ban, and it was revolving around TikTok that caught kind of the heat and the debate of the populace and of TikTok users, who are, I think, 170 million strong right now in America. And so they set this ban out, and they said you got a year to sell it and get it from under Chinese ownership, and then we'll see if that happens. That's supposed to happen at the head of, I think, Q1 2025. So it became popular. TikTok got its start in 2017, but it really became popular in 2019, kind of because of Hollywood. Right? We had Will Smith, The Rock, Kevin Hart, Miley Cyrus. They were all jumping on there, and they really drew some big crowds. And so it's a short form video content app, and it's used by 6 in 10 teenagers. And with 20% of those 6 admitting that they're on it almost constantly. And according to Pew Research out of DC, a nonpartisan fact tank with a goal of informing the public about issues and attitudes and trends, they were able to find that 20% of the teenagers that use it say they're on it almost constantly. And I would dare to say that that number's higher. It's just others wouldn't admit it. But at 20%, that's 2.5 million teenagers. So it was facts like these that I was running into at the very beginning to know that, well, this looks like an issue. Maybe we should look into this. And that's what kind of drew me or rode me down this rabbit hole to present it to you today. The drive behind the ban. Okay, so like what caused, I mean, surely the government hasn't shown extreme care in our teenage youth in the last, I don't know, 30 or 40 years. So what drove the ban? Well, it's expressed by Senator Maria Cantwell, who chairs the Senate Commerce Committee, and she said, Congress is acting to prevent foreign adversaries from conducting espionage, surveillance, maligned operations, harming vulnerable Americans or our servicemen and servicewomen and our U.S. government personnel. So is TikTok a threat of espionage owned by a foreign adversary? Well, yes, 100%. Is TikTok a continuation and an accelerant to our terms and conditions culture, stripping us of all of our data? Well, yes, 100%. Is the most important issue that TikTok is contributing to one of the greatest mentally crippling addictions to our youth in American history? 100% yes. And that's the purpose of this position paper, is to enlighten you. While these issues can stand on their own, like I said, the mere fact that these issues are bundled and sold together in the app known as TikTok is the sole reason that you shouldn't be participating in it, or find solace maybe in the ban, or make it something that isn't being consumed by the adolescents in your life. Beyond this position paper, I really hope that the message being delivered is that you begin to become aware of the scourge and plunder of the play-based childhood that the internet and apps like TikTok have taken part in over the last 15 years, and that we begin to rein that in and win it back for the youth of our nation so that they can be the next ones who come up and not be just totally fucked, okay? So that's something that I really hope we take away from this. These are all facts that I can cite. These are all things that you can look into, and I really challenge you to do that. All right, we're going to start with part one, the loss of privacy. This is a big one, okay? So we're going to start with the right to privacy. So if we lose something, we have to know that we have a right to it. Now, the right to privacy is an element of various legal traditions that intends to restrain governmental and private actions that threaten the privacy of individuals. It was Samuel D. Warren and Louis Brandeis who wrote The Right to Privacy and published it in 1890. A quote from that says that the individual shall have full protection in person and in property is a principle as old as the common law, but it has been found necessary from time to time to define anew the exact nature and extent of such a protection. So the right and decision to give what is comfortable and keep what is sacred. That's exactly what we need to be taking from this. It is in this that individuals are driven unto the true enjoyment of life, something that few feel when exposed so fully through the means of technology. It is the interconnectivity that has brought us to the place of needing redefinement and reproclamation of the exact nature and the extent of such a protection, which is the right to privacy. Privacy in its nature is meek, it's quiet, and it's when it surrounds us. But in its absence, it's terrifying, and it leaves people feeling ultimately threatened that the decision to be known is no longer theirs, but at the will of the shadows, right? This is why we must act in full forethought and be loud as our world moves forward, that we're keeping in mind the protection of privacy for the individual in all turns. This is the first kind of marker that led me to start looking into TikTok and how it's violating our privacy. And it's something that I don't think enough people talk about, not just in the security industry, but across media in general, the content in general. Privacy and the right to it is not something that is very well protected. And those who are noble enough to stand up and set up organizations, set up things that are, bring awareness, those are few and far between. So I think that we need to start really defining what the right to privacy is, which I'm going to try to do in the next couple of slides, and then letting it be something that's on the forefront of our mind. So as we engage with things like TikTok, we are keeping the right to privacy as a barrier to not go too far into giving up too much, so that a lot of us are at a point where we can't get it back on our own. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is terms and conditions culture. That's T&C. So if you don't know, terms and conditions are all that little tiny print that lawyers build and companies get lawyers to just stack really high, and attorneys, right? And then they say, will you accept all of this with a check mark, right? So I try to kind of play this melody throughout this entire paper to remind us that we have a couple of different dynamics working against us, not just in the app of TikTok, but in digital age and society itself. So one of those is the terms and conditions culture. It refers to that widespread practice, like I mentioned, lengthy, complex, like opaque legal agreements that we just use and go, okay, yeah, I clicked that, And so user complacency, most users accept these terms without reading or fully understanding them due to their length and legal complexity. Like when's the last time you read out of a terms and conditions for a social media app, or for buying anything on Amazon, or for downloading a movie on, Hulu or something like that? You don't. I don't read it either. Well, what that does is it causes an imbalance of power, where companies often craft these agreements to maximize their rights and to limit user protections, creating an unequal relationship. When that becomes a tone all the way through business, right, then it's the company versus the user, and you and I and the people who are within that company with other companies just trying to live have to be the one who's at a disadvantage. The other thing that it starts to portray is illusion of consent, right? So users are given no real choice but to accept, as declining usually means losing access to essential services, which essential is kind of a hard word right there, because how essential is a social media app, right? But like I said, first of all, this spreads far wider than just an app. But to communicate and to sell for your business and to do this and, to engage and feel like you have, people surrounding you and that you have community, or that you find more interest in your hobbies, it feels like those sorts of essential things are often, we lose access to those if we don't give up the right to privacy and if we don't trade off. So it's that privacy and rights trade-off. These agreements often require users to surrender privacy rights or agree to terms that may not align with their interests or even their understanding, just to use something. So this culture reflects a systematic issue and a systemic issue where legal compliance is emphasized over genuine user empowerment and informed consent. The other thing that we are fighting in the right to privacy is data mining. Okay, so data mining is the process of analyzing large data sets to discover patterns, correlations, insights by using statistical, mathematical, and machine learning techniques. This is the exact reason that you go over and you're talking to, your cousin Vinny, and you're like, yo, man, I think that I might get a new watering system for my yard, right? I might get a sprinkler system, like put it out there. And then before you even get home, you're checking your phone at a red light and there's a sprinkler system ad. That is because of data mining. So data mining can be seen as the intrusive extraction or exploitation of personal or sensitive information, or even vulnerable moments, from large data sets without adequate user consent, often violating privacy and enabling unethical practices like surveillance, manipulation, and discrimination. Because you can imagine the sprinkler system company that bought that data, bought into that data, that said, hey, when you see somebody who talks about this, send them this ad. That's not the only threat that we're dealing with. We're dealing with a lot of threatening actors by giving all of our data out there, where they can start to use manipulation and coerce groups of people. They can start to use surveillance and know who's talking about what. Or they can start to use discrimination and say that this group of people isn't going to be advertised this helping thing because, we don't like that group of people, or that group of people doesn't deserve it, or they won't do what we think they should with it. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with data mining sets. So these are the two major what should I say, the two major attackers to the right to privacy. And this is some of the foundation that TikTok is built on. So where we sit today, we find that, select groups of people have traded their forgetfulness for the creativity of exploit. They forget the sanctity of privacy because they found a way to make money. If we do not define anew, like Sam Warren said, the exact nature and extent of such protection over the right to privacy, we're bound to be reduced to nothing but lines of information for sale, and no information will be able to be kept from that transaction. So the second part I want to talk about, a little rough on the language, I understand, but it's the rape of privacy. So there is a right that is there, and it's being stripped from us. And like I said, Luis D. Brandeis and Samuel D. Warren were prominent American lawyers who co-authored the influential 1890 Harvard Law article, The Right to Privacy. And in this work, they argued for the legal protection of individual privacy, defining it as the right to be let alone. And the article emerged in response to technological advancements such as the printing press or the sale of portraits of others, and sensational journalism caused them to sit down and write this, this paper and put it in the scientific journal or the lawyer journal or whatever it was, laying the foundation for modern privacy law by emphasizing the need to safeguard personal dignity and autonomy against intrusive behaviors. So I've taken a quote from them, and it was very odd. As I was reading it, I could see where they were arguing because like somebody had a portrait of their Aunt Myra, and it was beautiful, and maybe it was even a little revealing, who knows, and they needed to sell it. Uncle Jeff sold it, and now it's hanging in a house down the street, and that feels like an encroach in privacy. And then sensational journalism was really kicking up, like everything from Hamilton and everything that he wrote and he defended and he got written against him. All of that was kind of culminating at the turn of this century, and it caused a lot of good thinking to come out of it of what should we guard? What is a right? What is too far? And Sam and Lewis are trying to define that here. So I'm going to read it in the red for today's day and age, but this is the exact quote if they were here now probably saying this. So data mining companies are overstepping in every direction the obvious bounds of personal identifiable information and intimate knowledge of individuals. Data is no longer the resource of the idle and of the vicious, but it has become trade, which is pursed with industry as well as effrontery. To satisfy a prurient taste, the details of sexual exploitation of adults and children are spread broadcast in the columns of forums and direct messages. To occupy the indolent, column upon column is filled with data and exploitation, which can only be procured by intrusion upon the agreed terms and conditions. That reads like he's fucking saying that to Congress right now. And this was over 100 years ago, almost 150 years ago. So another quote from them that I want to talk about is, and I've done it again, so just listen. Easy of comprehension, appealing to that weak side of biologically engineered dopamine hits of social media interaction, which is never wholly cast down by the misfortunes and frailties of those brutally hurt from those interactions, both physically and mentally. No one can be surprised that it usurps the place of interest in brains capable of other things. The unimportance of social media connection destroys at once the robustness of thought or the true physical human connection. No enthusiasm can flourish. No generous impulse can survive under its blighting influence. That is how I feel about social media, about the right and the rape of privacy, and about what digital things are doing to us. We're not using them in a very responsible way, and that's causing us to get into situations where people are being hurt, and we're looking the other way because it's trade at this point. It's something that you can have a transaction with. So I want to talk about the last section of the loss of privacy, and we're at 3:20, so I will pick it up through probably the danger of China, though that isn't as long. It's the potential power of data. So if we have a right to privacy, and that right is being taken from us, right, then what have they taken? What's the power of what they've taken? Great question. Well, with great power comes great responsibility, unless it's data. That's not Ben, Uncle Bear. That's right. So unless it's data, you don't have to be responsible for it at all. So how powerful is the collection of data? Let's talk about this. The power for destruction that comes behind the force of data mining and collection is one of titan proportions in the life that you and I live right now. When you collect at the rate that is present in today's world, new ways to socially sort with increasing precision become the tip of a spear carried by Achilles of a problem, right? It's the greatest mythical spear of all time, is that data mining at the rate that they are collecting it is causing us a huge problem. By combining multiple forms of data sets, a lot can be learned in a short amount of time. Now, this has been called algorithmic profiling, and it raises concerns about how little people know about their data that is being collected as they search, as they communicate, as they buy, as they browse, as they travel, and much, much more. Much of this sorting goes under the radar, as media outlets won't really report on it. They won't talk about it because, well, a cocaine user isn't going to tell you who their dealer is, right? They don't want to get away from the thing that's making them feel high or making them money. And so you don't hear much about algorithmic profiling unless you get into some educated literature where people are talking about the effects of this, the consequences of this in our society, and what it's doing, and just potentially what it could do to us. So, excuse me, Pam Dixon is the executive director. Uh-oh. Here we go. I knew that would happen. I just didn't know where. Sorry. Pam Dixon is the executive director of the World Privacy Forum, and she presented to the U.S. Congress. She reported on finding data brokers selling all sorts of things, from lists of rape victims, addresses of domestic violence shelters, they got me. You're right, Josh. They got me. What if they just took me out here? Domestic violence shelters, sufferers of genetic disease, victims of addiction, and much more. Those lists are out there. You can literally buy lists off the dark web from data brokers that will tell you people in a certain location who suffer from a certain type of addiction. And then you can target them with ads. You can target them with, more addiction, anything you want. Now, she testified before Congress, and she said, quote, 320 million others in the United States are not able to escape from the activities of data brokers. Our research shows that only a small percentage of known consumer data brokers offer a voluntary opt-out. These opt-outs can be incomplete, extremely difficult, and must typically be done one by one, site by site. Often, third parties are not allowed to opt individual consumers out of data brokers. So you can't hire anybody just to go around and do it. Individuals have to do it. Now, this state of affairs exists because no legal framework requires data brokers to offer opt-out or suppression of consumer data. Few people know that data brokers even exist, and beyond that, few know what they actually do. There's about 4,000 data brokers. I think this was 2 years ago when she presented it, despite the large and growing size of the industry. And until the committee that she was presenting started its work, the entire industry largely escaped public scrutiny. So the World Privacy Forum has put them on blast, but that's just one committee. That's just one, organization. And before them, no one was saying anything. So it seems harmless, right? Because it's just like, well, I mean, yeah, that kind of sucks for those certain individuals, but is it harmless for everybody's data to be collected? And it seems harmless to most. That's usually if you start to tell them about it, they don't really want to know, but that's what they will present is like, well, I don't care. Most often you'll get kind of an apathetic statement like, well, I don't have anything to hide. Or, they can know what I picked up. I picked up a pack of 12 Bud Lights from the Metro Mart. I don't care. But it's that apathy that is going to allow this atrocious act of mass data collection to continue. Because the minute that you're talking to, the minute that you're taking that Bud Light that you just got, right, the 12 pack, to your buddy's house, and you start to talk about sensitive things like your case of genital warts, and the next thing you know, you're getting ads for it while you're screen sharing your device for your company's quarterly review, you might feel a tad different about them just collecting everything that they need to know on you. But that's nothing compared to people maybe like your CFO, right? Like Kathy, right? Who just got asked by an underground reporter about the rape she experienced 3 years ago. So you see, a data point that didn't need to be collected or stored in this way to eventually be bought and ousted on a site on the dark web called Medbase 200, where you can buy rape victims' names for less than 8 cents per name. This is the issue that we're facing, and this has to do with some of the data collection, and I don't know how deep that goes, how far behind the curtain it gets, but they're doing this, right? They're doing this. So the last thing that I want to touch on with how powerful this data can actually be is a quote from Pam Dixon, the executive director of the World Privacy Forum, where she simply just says, "We are their business model." We just need the common people to understand exactly how powerful data can be, because if a company holds enough data and they have enough funds, well, they can cater your online experience, which is a lot of your experience today, without you even knowing it. And with the amount of time we spend online, this means that they're manipulating your daily life. Cultural shifts can take place in ways that cause great harm to certain groups of people. And it means that information can be left out and cause an entire country to shut down and be psychologically tested over the rebranding of something, or it can pinpoint, local psychological stresses and flush out where someone sheltering from abuse is located, and then sell that data for pennies on the dollar, causing the abused to never fully recover. And these are the issues that we face and the power that they hold when this data is actually mined from us. Now, that's heady, that's a lot, but I just need you to know that that's the first piece of the puzzle in understanding the danger of TikTok, leading social media with 1.2 billion worldwide users and roughly 16 million users under the age of consent in America. So TikTok has more data than any government globally, and there's one government on the entire planet that has ownership in the company, the PRC. So that leads me to part 2, the danger of China, okay? Now, I need to give you a little bit of background on China before we get into it so that you understand that this is more at play than just the app of TikTok. TikTok, remember, is that center dot in the Venn diagram, okay? But they are playing a longer game way outside of this app that is going to cause them to win at their game if we aren't aware of it and choose not to take part in it as individuals, okay? So the first little part, the sleeping dragon, right? Like China is the dragon that has been asleep for a long time because they had some way unrest early on, and it kind of just shook out in bad ways for them up until about the beginning of the 1900s. So let's talk about it. First, they've gone through an incredible amount of change in relatively a short amount of time. In 1911, the revolution was the culmination of a decade of agitation, revolts, and uprisings. Its success marked the collapse of the Chinese monarchy, the end of an over 2 millennia imperial rule in China, okay? That happened in just the other day, in 1911. The imperial rule had 2 millennia of rule, and it was gone. And that was the Qing dynasty. So then we move forward to 1949. There's a lot that goes on in between those years, but we get to about 1949 of a lot of unrest, and the Chinese Communist Revolution was a social revolution in China that began in 1927 and culminated with the proclamation of the People's Republic of China. That's the PRC in 1949. This revolution was led by a party of people called the Chinese Communist Party, which afterwards became the ruling party over China and is still the ruling party over China today. In 1958, Mao Zedong wanted to change China from an agrarian society to a modern communist society. And so the CCP wanted to make China able to compete with other industrialized nations. And he started off on a very long-winded rule that he tried to do that, right? He has a lot of writings and a lot of things that he said that really helped shape China's understanding of the world and their worldview and where they rest today. You're going to find out in 1989, we all have heard of the Tiananmen Square incident. This was in 1989, but after weeks of unsuccessful attempts between the demonstrators and the Chinese government to find peaceful resolution, the Chinese government declared martial law. Now, grievances included inflation, corruption, limited preparedness of graduates for the new economy, and the conflict led to hundreds of protesters and maybe even thousands in total, including soldiers, dead and killed. Now, the reason that I put this here is because this was the beginning of a shift, and I'm gonna quote in a little bit Rush Doshi, who has a book called The Long Game, and in that he talks about these 3 or 4 phases of China trying to get to their centennial year, which is in 2049, and what they want out of that. And this was a shift in the phase. Now, in the 1990s, it's called the Peaceful Rise because China transitioned from this close agrarian economy to manufacturing and exporting things to a point that it became a real powerhouse. We got the Made in China label, right? It adopted a policy called the Peaceful Rise, where it was downplaying military ambitions while investing in technological, industrial, and infrastructural advancements to expand the global influence. And so that led to, in 2013, things like the Belt and Road Initiative. Once it started to kind of get manufacturing and export under its wing, where it held a ton of it globally, it started to then spread its fingers out, and China's focus became on cultivating soft power and economic independence globally while strengthening the position in Asia, signaling its long-term goal to challenge the U.S. dominance and become the preeminent global power. This isn't fantasy. This isn't like Bear going off and being like, man, Bear doesn't like China. And it has nothing to do with Chinese people. This is the government of one of the largest countries on the globe. And this is all documented in their government documents, in their media documents, like their written text and their speeches and all of that from the 60s onward. Like, this is all documented that this is something that they're trying to accomplish, where they challenge U.S. dominance, they become the hegemony for the world, and their dream and their vision and their outlook is the dominant power globally. That's what they want. And so they use things like the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, the Belt and Road Initiative, it's a global development, okay, that President Xi Jinping took and started in 2013, where its goal is to enhance regional connectivity and foster economic integration across Asia, Europe, and Africa and beyond through infrastructure development, trade, and investment. So, for instance, one of the things in the Belt and Road Initiative is that China is a huge player in the infrastructure and the electrical grid of Brazil, because they provide other things that lets Brazil come in, or that Brazil lets China come in and build these initiatives, build this infrastructure. And then at the end of the day, they own the lights. And that's exactly how it is going. That's exactly what they're trying to get to go down. So the BRI, or the Belt and Road Initiative, aims to create a vast trade and infrastructure network, boosting China's economic influence and political clout. They do that through like the Silk Road economic belt, the 21st century maritime Silk Road, and a bunch of other things. Now, this is all leading and culminating to 2049, their centennial year, which they call the Great Rejuvenation of the Chinese Nation. And the phrase encapsulates China's ambition to restore its historical prominence and achieve national strength, prosperity, global leadership, by 2049, making 100 years since the founding of the People's Republic of China, and it symbolizes overcoming past humiliations and reclaiming global influence and fulfilling its long-term vision of becoming the leading world power. From one of the greatest experts, like I said, the Brookings member, Rush Doshi, he answers the question of, okay, well, what does this all mean? They have this huge plan, so what does that mean for us? And he says, from his words out of his book, at the global level, Chinese order would involve seizing the opportunities of the great changes unseen in a century and displacing the United States as the world leading state. This would require successfully managing the principal risk following from the great changes, Washington's unwillingness to gracefully accept decline by weakening the forms of controlling, supporting American global order while strengthening those forms of control supporting a Chinese alternative. Essentially, he's using that idea is using Mao Zedong's teachings on revolutionary guidance to surround the cities from the countryside. If they own everything, but America wasn't willing and we're the last ones, well, that is what it is. So one way that they've done this and how this all ties back into TikTok is because, yes, America has an enemy. It's the PRC. I forgot about that slide. It's pretty important. Is the boundaries of Douyin. Okay, so this is how all of this China long game ties in to TikTok. All right, so in America, we have TikTok. Well, this actually the rest of the globe has a company and an app called TikTok. They're widely known social media app. It's become a global phenomenon, captivating millions around the world with its user-generated content focused on entertainment, music, viral challenges, all those sorts of things. And it's owned by a company, a Chinese tech giant called ByteDance. TikTok serves as an international platform. It prioritizes these short, engaging videos that appeal to a wide range. It has become a space where users can share dance routines or comedy skits and other trends that encourage interaction, self-expression, although concerns have been raised, obviously, about how these trends can sometimes prioritize entertainment over intellectual growth, right? Here's the problem. They took that app, okay, when they created TikTok, and they duplicated it, and they call it Douyin. You can only access Douyin in Chinese borders. So they have an app that looks similar, but it's completely different from the rest of the world. And Douyin, TikTok's Chinese counterpart, operates with a very different set of parameters. Exclusive to China, Douyin shares its foundational technology and design with TikTok, but it's tailored to align with the Chinese government's standards and social priorities. This app incorporates more stringent content controls and surveillance mechanisms reflecting China's approach to digital governance, and it emphasizes on maintaining social harmony. So it places a greater emphasis on educational and skill improvement content, promoting material that's intended to enhance learning and personal development. So while children underage in China get on TikTok, they see how to do science experiments, they see museums, they see history, that sort of thing. And when children all over the world get on TikTok outside of China, they see Uncle Bob falling off the roof, or a couple cats playing together, or, as you'll see here in a little bit, even worse things. Okay, so there's a major difference that lies in between these two, in that Douyin has also, on top of all of this, chosen to set boundaries on their platform. For instance, according to Douyin, their user agreement, there's no age minimum, where in America we have a 13-year-old and lower shouldn't be on TikTok, but you just click yes on the terms and conditions and you're in. But in Douyin, they don't have an age minimum. What they do is, if you're under 18, you must obtain the consent of a legal guardian. And while on Douyin, while you're on Douyin, you have boundaries. So since 2021, users under 14 who have been authenticated using their real names are only able to access the platform between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. That restriction has been pushed farther, and today's children are actually only allowed 60 minutes on the app per day within that time allotment. So new educational content, including like everything that I said, science, museums, history, that sort of things, those have all been launched as part of youth mode on Douyin in an attempt to educate while also curbing screen addiction, a very real addiction that's founded on many studies that we'll get into here in a moment. But China has implemented these things, and not just on this app. They've implemented it across the board. So in video gaming, they've restricted that as well, saying that you can play video games online for a daily limit of 90 minutes. And as of 2021, minors were barred from gaming at all during the weekdays and can only limit it to that hour once a day on the weekends. So these differences in cultural approach to technology show how ByteDance and China have strategically adapted the platform to serve distinct roles, not just in terms of regional preferences, but in line with a larger social and political context that is going to play in to the great rejuvenation of the country. The higher picture here, what are we dealing with? The absolute sweet, tasteless poison that is TikTok content being consumed at every stroke of the clock in America is rewiring the youth of our nation and rotting their sense of purpose and global understanding of life and a healthy point of view. Social media, screen time, and the internet is a major contributor to the downfall of the youth of America and America in general, and the removal of our name from the top list of healthy or educated or free countries. We're slaves to these addictions, and our addiction is this screen. And we are becoming a society of glow-faced, opinionated couch quarterbacks that have lost the art of discernment that it takes to be sharp, vibrant, and intelligent in society. It isn't just a TikTok problem, it's a technology problem. But TikTok stands alone in that they strip your privacy, they use terms and conditions, they data mine. China holds the controls of what you get to view and what the algorithm says. And what's next as we go into it should be the nail in the coffin to your view on TikTok. In part 3, the scourge on our youth. So social media is poison. And the reason that it's poison, I'm going to get into right now. TikTok is one of the many heads to the current problematic state of our youth. It's because TikTok is so damaging to our youth and also owned by, well, our known modern enemy, that it becomes the first head that we have to cut off from this deathly hydra that is really assailing us. It is no exaggeration. I know that I'm using big flamboyant language to yeah, he's just looking for the like, or he's looking for it, but I'm trying to grip your face and shake it a little bit so that you understand what I'm trying to talk about, okay? So in recent years, social media has become part of our lives, right? Even among children. From the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic period, the media device and internet access rapidly increased. Adolescents connected to the internet alone, consulting social media, mostly Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and during that lockdown, the internet usage allowed communication with peers and the continuation of activities such as school teaching and things that we needed our society to continue with. However, we have to keep in mind that the media usage may be related to some adverse consequences, especially in the most vulnerable people in our society, young children. The National Library of Medicine, inside a library of scientific literature collated by the NIH, says that has posted an article in August of 2022 titled "The Use of Social Media in Children and Adolescents, a Scoping Review on the Potential Risks." What they did is they took 68 reports, from studies to reports to articles of high-end professionals who have collated all together their information and used it in the terms of, from PubMed, of social media, social network, health, and pediatrics. And what it yielded was this. 19 of those studies reported social media use correlates with depressive symptoms, anxiety, and loneliness. Physical activity negatively correlates with depression. So 19 of the reports that they had showed depression, anxiety, and loneliness are coming from adolescents who are engaging in social media. It's not like, oh, it's not your kid, or it's just these kids, or it's those kids over there. It is children. If your child is on social media, they are correlating themselves with something that will give you depressive symptoms, anxiety, and loneliness, especially in an underdeveloped brain. 15 clinical studies and reviews came out of those 68 that showed that obesity correlated to junk food advertisement and more sedentary lifestyle was promoted by social media use. The studies also linked that with poor sleep to social media, poor or dysregulated sleep affects the regulation of energy balance. So obesity, sedentary lifestyle, not getting enough sleep, which doesn't lead or help in the education or the growing of knowledge when you want, especially at that rate that they are. 15 of the reports came away with scientific evidence supporting that the internet, mobile devices, and social networking sites linked to mental health impairment and cyberbullying. So a lack of self-worth and bullying and these sorts of things are coming from social media when we let our adolescents just be turned over to it. And one of those things is pornography that it's pulling from. Now, these are all cyclical, and each amplifies one mental stress by partaking in another. That's the problem, is what you get here is like your depression and anxiety and loneliness. That's going to help you want to be sedentary. You're going to, maybe get a little obese and poor sleep, which is definitely not going to help with the lack of self-worth. And it's probably going to get you bullied, and it will even push you into pornography, which will begin to depress you and give you anxiety and loneliness. Do you see how that works? Out of all of that, you still get more poor things on top of it. 14 publications pointed towards psychological problems revealing body apprehension, poor nutrition, psychological breaks, and it leads to a more sedentary lifestyle. Here's the problem. All of that cyclical stuff causes a compounding damage. For instance, pornography alone in adolescence has huge consequences. Exposure to pornography in minors under 18 can have significant ill effects on their psychological, emotional, and social development. It can distort their understanding of healthy relationships and consent. It fosters unrealistic expectations about intimacy and body image. Frequent exposure may desensitize minors to inappropriate behavior, increase the likelihood of developing compulsive habits, and hinder their ability to form genuine connections. Additionally, early access to pornography and explicit content can exacerbate feelings of the anxiety, the shame, the confusion, undermining the mental well-being and hindering their ability to navigate age-appropriate experiences. And that is just in pornography alone. Not like on a computer that's going to cause all of that. But then you put them into social media and you get all of that. This is the nail in the coffin. This is the third trifecta of that Venn diagram that we're hitting on TikTok, because it's easy to get to porn on TikTok. It's easy to get depressed on TikTok. And these kids are facing it. Now, let's get into some counter arguments. But first, I want to ask you a question. So let me ask you this. If this wasn't our phone, right? Because this thing is always on me. It's like right here. It is already rang in this alone. If it wasn't that, but it was proven that a very specific thing was causing everything I've just stated globally to adolescents and children, wouldn't it be a headline? I mean, mental illness is directly connected to social media engagement. So we can do better for the children. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to fly through this because I got 10 minutes left, but there's a couple counter arguments that people say, right? Obviously, the first counter argument is the First Amendment. A lot of people say, well, banning TikTok abridges our freedom of speech, and, well, that can't happen, right? The problem is that that's a misinterpretation, and it's a bit of confusion around what the amendment protects. So taken at face value, one would posit that by the government creating a law in which they don't allow TikTok in America, they're prohibiting the free exercise thereof, right here that it says. Establishment, of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech. Well, the problem is the prohibiting the free exercise is the establishment of religion. It's abridging the freedom of speech is the real argument, because that's what the First Amendment actually says. Now, abridging means curtailing, and curtailing means to reduce in extent or quantity or impose a restriction on. I'll admit it's not cut and dry. The First Amendment has a lot of gray in it, right, to where it is. But I will stand on, if the government did choose to not allow TikTok to operate within our digital borders, it wouldn't be abridging anything that anything that the government should have its hands in anyway, which is a private contract. Because the reason that TikTok isn't going away and it isn't abridging your freedom of speech is because you clicked a box. You signed a contract. It's binding. It stands up in court. And it's between you and the company, the parent company of TikTok, which is ByteDance. Now would be a good time to reflect on that terms and conditions, right? Or, that this TikTok is owned by the PRC. Because when you signed that contract and agreed to those terms, the first thing you agreed to is by accessing or using TikTok services, you confirm that you can form a binding contract with them. So that's formed. The second thing is that all content, software, images, text, graphics, illustrations, logos, patents, trademarks, service marks, copyrights, photographs, audio, video, music, and the look and feel. They just quote look and feel in your terms? What the hell is that supposed to mean? And all the intellectual property rights related thereto are either owned or licensed by TikTok. So anything you put on there, they don't own, or you don't own anymore. They own it. And not only do they own it, they can license it. They can sell it for ads in Denmark, and you wouldn't even know. And they're making money off of your content. Also, you waive any and all rights of privacy, publicity, or any other rights of a similar nature in connection with your user content or any portion thereof. I mean, listen, that is from the terms and conditions on TikTok right now. The second counter argument we've kind of talked about, no harm, no foul. It's like, I don't care that the Chinese government's watching me, and that's fine, but that's actually also a red herring. So a red herring is a fallacy, a logical fallacy where a relevant topic or piece of information is introduced to divert attention away from the original issue being at hand. Yeah, CapCut is also owned. Awesome. And by implying that the only valid reason for concern is direct harm to oneself, they ignore other potential impacts or ethical considerations that warrant attention. For instance, the scientific proof that our youth of the nation are being decimated mentally, physically, and emotionally by the digital cocaine that they're blowing lines of off the Black Mirror. So it's a red herring to think that, like, well, it's no harm, no foul against me. Yeah, but what about the issue, right? What about the actual ethical considerations around this? There are other arguments that people present and that I've talked to people about leading up to this that definitely warrant talking about, but there's nothing that I can find that dismisses the actual atrocities that this app is pushing forth, which is the last portion of this. And I have 8 minutes, but I'm going to run over. I'm just going to tell you that now. This is probably going to be like an hour and 10 minutes because I don't want to just rush through this. It would be not, what should I say? It wouldn't be doing it well or doing it service, and I don't want to seem inconsiderate. So listen, there's a couple atrocities that have come out of TikTok, and I will tell you this, the next section of the paper is explicit. It starts out with some serious but lighter issues that the app has caused, and it works itself into some things that might be triggering or traumatic if you've ever been hurt, manipulated, or taken advantage of over the internet. So viewer discretion, listener discretion is advised. The scourge has not only shown its effects scientifically, but qualitatively as well. And one of those ways is through Dancing with the Devil, the 7M TikTok cult. This is a Netflix documentary that you can watch, and it goes through the journey of two sisters through a pseudo-hyper-evangelical church turned dancing label that signs its young groomed members into a life of dancing on TikTok and social media platforms. With the situation containing obvious other issues outside of social media, the documentary, though not being very critical of TikTok, was an interesting display on one of many ways that the platform can be weaponized, right? It took this fundamental digital dopamine weapon, and then it pointed it back at users to manipulate them to give their money, their time, and their devotion to a narcissistic pseudo-pastor, and almost double entendre of damage, seeing that statistically these 20-somethings are more than likely suffering from what? All the effects that social media we've talked about prior in this paper. So all that said, from the looks of it, in this documentary, it's very interesting. I'd go watch it. It seemed really easy to do, right? The next one is social media babies. So from the absolute abuse of consent and breaking the barrier of an autonomy angle. Social media children who were used by influencers over the last decade to gain followers and income on their behalf are coming forward and speaking ill of how their parental guardians ignored all consent. This was in a CNN report article titled "The First Social Media Babies Are Adults Now," and that adult that they had in there was named Cam Barrett. They disclosed that she knows the exact day that she started her menstrual cycle as a child back in 2009, and this is because her mother posted it on Facebook for the internet to know. And now, 25, Barrett is a part of a growing movement of young people who are urging lawmakers to protect children whose parents monetize their images, videos, and private lives over social media. Another atrocity. Now listen, these next few, they get a little okay? So just be prepared. National Criminal Justice Association, they state that the social media giant TikTok has emerged as the biggest, fastest growing danger zone for children who are targeted by adult predators online. Law enforcement officials and others who track child exploration told that to the Wall Street Journal. What troubles those who track child exploitation is that TikTok's algorithm is designed to learn what type of content users like and then feed them a string of it. That keeps youngsters glued to the site and makes it easier for pedophiles to seek them out. With so many videos pouring onto the platform, child exploitation experts question whether TikTok can effectively monitor them for their inappropriate behavior. The article cites a number of criminal cases in which adults stalked children on TikTok and later sexually abused them. In one, a 42-year-old Alabama man began exchanging romantic notes with a 14-year-old Texas girl. The notes were visible publicly, and several TikTok commenters on the notes accused him of inappropriate conduct. But last March, he hopped on a bus to Texas and met up with the girl, and several days later he was arrested, and he was later indicted on charges related to sexual assault for the child. TikTok, Chinese-owned by ByteDance, said that it takes steps to protect younger users and is constantly working to improve them, but there is nothing to prevent users under the site's minimum age of 13 for using it. So Aaron Burke, a division chief at the main investigation arm of the Department of Homeland Security and past leader of its child exploitation unit, is among those who cite TikTok as a platform frequently used by predators to meet children. The Villanova Law Institute addresses commercial sexual exploitation, published an article in late February of 2024. And they stated in that article, like many other social media platforms, TikTok operates on a system of views designed to encourage creators to garner as many eyes, as much engagement as they can to take their content and start receiving profit over it. Now listen to this. This is how it works, okay? TikTok's algorithm keeps track of what content a user engages with, circulates similar videos on their screen, and through TikTok's live feature, creators can broadcast their actions in real time. And when they broadcast those, they can receive what TikTok is calling GIFs for watching. GIFs are then converted into what TikTok calls diamonds, which can be exchanged for real currency. But the problem is these interactions can quickly become exploitative, with minors performing sexually explicit acts in exchange for financial gain. So under this scheme, minors are encouraged to create content of themselves dancing or behaving in a way that might otherwise be viewed inappropriately in the name of likes and diamonds. Once a user views these types of videos, they will be shown more and more content featuring this. So as John Rouse, a police veteran who currently leads a team targeting child sex offenders for Interpol, says that child sex offenders will gravitate towards where there are children, and TikTok represents what is likely the world's largest community of minors. Forbes has posted several articles about ways that predatory behavior is playing out on TikTok. You can see those detailed and cited in the PDF. You can download it from the link in the description. The International Center of Missing and Exploited Children says one thing that I took from. This is also cited. Online groomers can persuade a child to meet in less than half an hour, and according to the findings of the UK-based research team, in some cases, it can take as little as 18 minutes to convince a child to meet. This is why we have a problem. This is why this isn't just one-sided. Imagine everything that I've talked about so far and then capped with that. We have an issue, okay? And TikTok is it. So we need to be on guard, and we need to take this information and do with it what we need to do with it in our personal lives, okay? I understand that the government is doing what the government does, and there's not some big organization that you can start or that you can suit up and take a gun and go get whatever you want to get, or that you can get it off your phone and buy a ethical phone that is not going to do anything that relates to this. But it's going to take us personally to make sure that the adolescents in your lives are safe and at least talked to about the dangers. Good luck convincing a 15-year-old to not be on TikTok, especially from a parent or a parental guardian. But if they can at least be told the things that do happen on TikTok, then they'll at least know what to look out for and maybe even convince them not to use it. It's a poison, and it accesses, like I didn't even get into everything. It accesses your entire phone hard drive while the app is in use. So it watches your content, it knows where you're going, it knows where you've been, it knows what your contacts are on your phone, and it knows even the text messages that you send. Not the DMs in the app, no, your text messages. And it knows other apps that you use too, and all of that continues. So as a conclusion, remember, it weakens our country by using data mining and terms and conditions culture. It gathers insight, and with China's centennial year within grasp, it attacks our youth to assure that we won't be a threat when it looks to establish global dominance. Finally, it's a scourge on our youth, and it facilitates the dark underbelly of the internet to pad and crawl its way into the hollowed out minds of our underage minors who already suffer from the glow of the Black Mirror and its psychological illnesses that we went through. Liking a video or a short laugh at a song, it's never going to justify that we keep this weapon dug into the side of not just our youth, but our nation. And so I propose that you delete TikTok. I'm not here flying the flag for the ban. That is up to the government, and obviously they think they know something that they're not sharing with us about how dangerous it is from a Chinese and national security perspective. But I implore you to delete TikTok, which you can find in the PDF, step-by-step guides if you don't know how to hold an app until it buzzes and delete it. Let me give you a few resources and then we'll get out of here. We're only 3 minutes over, which I can really appreciate. Bark. Bark.us. Bark is a parental control platform, monitors social media, emails, and texts, and they have a phone. And it looks like an iPhone, it works like an iPhone, and you can hand it to your kid, and through the app and through the software, you can pretty much just make sure that you're seeing what they're seeing, helping families create a safer digital environment within them. The second thing is Wait Until 8th. WaitUntil8th.org is a movement encouraging parents to delay giving their children smartphones at least until 8th grade. It fosters a collective pledge, and it empowers things, and it empowers family and empowers behavior for a healthier childhood to develop, getting rid of cyberbullying and screen addiction. Last, I talked about it at the very beginning, The Anxious Generation, which is a platform book by Jonathan Haidt. It's dedicated to exploring the rising mental health challenges that the youth face today. I encourage you to read it. Finally, DeleteMe.com. Delete Me is a privacy protection service that you actually sign up for, and it's not very expensive. I think it's a couple $100 for the year, and then they go out for a year and look for your information, and they tell you what it is, and they delete it. That's baller. These are the citations from the PDF. So download the PDF, and you can see everything that I've cited there. I really, really appreciate anybody who tuned in for even a minute. I'm going to get into just a little bit of Q&A. There's one question to answer. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. But I can't tell you how important this is and how important I feel this is and how important it is that you would even show up to watch even for a minute. The support means a lot. But I can tell that Kansas City Business Cast, which I was on, the KCBC913 at KCBC913 on Instagram and LinkedIn. I was on his platform. Michael, he's a total baller. He knows what's up. But he says CapCut is also owned by ByteDance. Is there also concern coming from that product as well? Now, I can tell you in all my study in TikTok and looking into China and looking into the right to privacy, CapCut didn't come across my desk. It didn't show up in a article. It didn't come across a Google search. So I'm sure there's concern about it. And maybe it's even sleeping right now and only a couple people are barking about it. But I didn't see anything on CapCut. So that's kind of is what it is. That was the only question that came from it. Please just add your questions in the comments and I'll access them. I might do a follow-up on this before the end of the year. If there's points or resources that you have that you present to me that change any of this information, please let me know because I can follow up on it. I'm not too prideful to think that, oh, I know everything. This is what I've seen. This is what I've ran into. And it's an atrocity. And it's killing a huge portion of our brain cells. So I really appreciate you guys. I really appreciate you. Listen and follow at the Security Today podcast on Spotify. You can find me on LinkedIn at Security Today Podcast and on Instagram at Security Today Podcast. Please smash the follow button, smash the like, and hit the bell for the YouTube channel because I want to post more stuff like, not exactly like this. I'll let it cool off a little bit. Next year we'll tackle something as big as this. But I do have physical security and all sorts of advice that I want to give out. So please smash the follow button. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you all. And I love that you don't agree with everything. But I did want to present it. I know it's pretty long-winded, but I wanted to get it out there and make sure that you understood the three real pillars that it's coming from: the loss of privacy, the danger of China, and the scourge of our youth. Appreciate you guys, and we will see you next